Construction rewards heroes, but a hero culture caps growth. If every win requires you, you don't have a business, you have a hostage situation. Today, we're going to fix that. I'm joined by George Pazanski, operator, investor, and process improvement specialist, to unpack a no BS framework. What, why, how? We'll define what good looks like, lock in why it matters so teams don't reprioritize in the field, and then free your people own the how. We'll also tackle faster bad news communication, separating direct causes from root causes, and using the golden hour to standardize success. This is about trading adrenaline for reliability, capes for systems, and chaos for profit. And you'll be able to get the most out of your people without burning them or you out. So if you want to build a company that runs without you when you step away, this episode is for you. This is Eric Anderton, and you're listening to Construction Genius, a leadership masterclass. Thomas Edison said that genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. If you're a construction leader, you know all about the perspiration, and this show is all about the 1% inspiration that you can add to your hard work to help you to improve your leadership. George, welcome to Construction Genius.
Oh, thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. You have a unique background, and I want to explore that a little bit. Just tell the audience a little bit about yourself, who you are, and what you do.
Yeah, my name, of course, George Pazanski, and I am a business process improvement specialist. I really help organizations and teams be able to drive change and create excellence in all that they do. I'm also an investor, and I own a home services business here in Schuylkill County, Pennsylvania.
That's great. With that home services business, do you work with general contractors sometimes in the work that you do?
We do. Absolutely.
What sets apart a good general contractor who's easy to work with, so to speak, or at least, not difficult to work with, from those guys who are kind of a pain in the neck?
Well, I think it's like almost any type of relationship. It's based on communication. The challenges that we've had with general contractors where we may not have the level of communication about the outcome that they expect or the changes that may be occurring. Bad news never gets better with age, very famous saying.
Yeah.
And I think the frustrations we've had that are the greatest have always been where the bad news was known, but it didn't get communicated in a timely fashion.
Okay. So does that put the onus on the subcontractor or the general contractor for the communication of the bad news?
Well, I think if the subcontractor's scope of work is affected by a negative outcome or a condition that's outside of expectations and may affect a timeline or other deliverable they've been asked to produce, then clearly it's the subcontractor's responsibility to communicate that in a timely fashion. And on the general contracting side, there are so many moving pieces, in a project on a site, that obviously the conflict that may occur that, you're just not ready for what we're going to be doing here today, or, you're not able to support, the resources we may need. But finding out that we knew that a week ago, but we still mustered our crews, we still, got on site. And then, that morning is when we found out, we need you to come back tomorrow. That is really frustrating because it represents a real significant cost and, just a lack of professionalism and coordination that I would say you could maybe attribute to a particular situation, but what we have found is that it's not that uncommon, even in some of the better operations.
Yeah, it's interesting. So that leads me to a question about process improvement. It seems as if processes are in place both to tap into the genius of human beings and sort of systematize what it is that perhaps we do well intuitively, but they're also in place to regulate the follies that we have as human beings. One of those follies being a reluctance to communicate bad news. How have you worked with companies to set processes in place that improve the timeliness of communication, particularly when it is bad news?
When I think about working with really large organizations, then I end up, working kind of with my small local business. There are so many things that are in common, and there's so many things that are not. And one of the things that are not, and I see this in general contractors we work with, and I certainly see it in our small business, is that we really depend on individuals much, much more than large organizations tend to. And what I mean by that is we're asking people to put on their cape every day
Yes.
and then to go out and fight that fire, go out and kind of save the city. And in my organization, I'm so lucky that we have just amazingly talented people who are professional firefighters, and they're really, really good at what they do. Getting that leopard to change their spots and to start really systemize, as you pointed out, to really say that there are periods of time, there are activities, there are techniques that I need to employ. And I don't have to focus on that fire. I got to focus on fire prevention and picking up the phone, making those calls, checking in. Those are things that aren't going to change the jobs you have on your sort of schedule for the day, but they're going to make a huge difference on what happens next week.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the things that I've observed over the years is that businesses are constrained by the brilliance of the people who start the business or the high performers of the business. And the reason they're constrained is because there's so much that those people do intuitively, instinctively, based on their experience, that
Yes.
is not easily replicable in other people in their organization. So in effect, they become a ceiling. What is the
Yes.
relationship between articulating and developing processes to the growth of a business?
And I think this is true in leadership, not just in construction, but really anywhere. It's a perspective around we versus me. And what I mean by that is when a leader recognizes that the growth of their organization, the scale that it can become, or even the success that it may have, is going to be dependent on their ability to not be there, their ability to, be able to walk away and still have those processes, have that communication, have that training so that people are able to do things. It is, it's heartbreaking. I see it in my own business. I see it in, our competitors, and I see it certainly with the contractors we work with, that it's very difficult to find talent. So we've got folks that, haven't taken vacation this year. And it's because we're so dependent on that individual, and when we can build something where we're not depending on that superhero,
Yeah.
where we have those systems, that is a mark of real excellence. And it's exactly what we'd like to always try to strive toward, to kind of put those capes in the closet.
So how do you begin to articulate and or improve a process? What's the first step you take when you're working with your clients?
Well, I try to make it super simple because I feel that in my field of work, if you study, you read books and go out and look at a lot of things, honestly, I think most of that is way overcomplicated. It's way more than is necessary. I think it's 3 questions. Just start with those 3 questions. And those 3 questions are what, why, and how. And this is what I think kind of confuses and frustrates when people don't separate those 3 things. If we think about the goal of somebody being able to have a process that's effective and they can kind of step away from it and have it work, what they often think about is the how. And what they're trying to do is tell everybody how to do that work. And I'm very detailed in the technique that I use, the tools that I use, the spreadsheet I use, whatever that is. And they think creating the process is telling people how to do the work. And in reality, it's the least important of the 3 questions. Being able to clearly describe the outcome that we need to create and what does good look like and what are the common mistakes or failures that you may see in creating that outcome, and then explaining why. What is the relevance of this deliverable? What is the relevance of this outcome, this step that you may be taking in the work that you do? When people understand what the outcome has to be and they understand why it's important so that they don't prioritize it or change it, then the how actually becomes easy. And they can become much more open-minded to the technique that you use, or human beings are rather incredible in coming up with their own clever ways on how. And if you think about it as an owner, as somebody trying to scale their business, do you really care about the how as much as you care about the what? And micromanagement is when people are managing the how, they're not managing the what.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons why people are so invested in the how is because their ego is tied to what they do. And
Exactly.
one of the challenges that people have is when they see what they do at, let's say, a level 10, and they observe one of their people trying to do that same thing, that same how at a level 7, they don't like that gap. Right.
Right.
And that's what causes them then to micromanage and to not delegate in the first place. But it's interesting how you
Yes.
begin with the what and the why, which are both questions that perhaps remove the ego of the person doing the task. Did I hear that right?
Absolutely. Yeah. It really is recognizing that obviously outcomes matter. And in many cases, when we're doing training, when we're trying to kind of develop those processes or develop those people, as you pointed out, the ego gets in the way of, let me show you all the things on how I do it. And it's not unusual that, especially maybe a newer employee, somebody who's learning a task or a procedure for the first time, they get wrapped up in some minutia. They get wrapped up in some details that really don't matter, and what ends up happening is that being able to remember all of the things I need to do means some of the most important things I might miss because I'm remembering or focusing on some of these, kind of unimportant things. But when you focus on the outcome, and one of the other techniques that I really love employing is asking people to really sort of understand the root cause of their success. So if you are that leader of your organization and you want to go out and you want to start scaling it, you want to start developing those processes, and you say, okay, I know what, I know why, and I understand now I have to get out of the business of telling people how to do things. I'm not telling you to just let people go out and have it be the Wild West.
Yes.
What I'm saying is understand those elements that have helped you be successful, the root causes of your success. And what we may find is there are a lot of things you're doing that other people could do other ways and it would be fine. It doesn't matter. It's not that big a deal. But there may be a few critical points, a few key points. And those things, if not done, will alter that outcome and not give you the result you're looking for. And when we can narrow the communication around what are those sort of root causes of what has helped us be successful in the process that I use, then you're giving people how that is really relevant and really focused, telling them the outcome that you expect, and helping them understand, the importance of it so they don't end up prioritizing something else over it. And that allows you to kind of really, let people kind of learn.
Okay, so let's talk about that.
Yeah.
One of the biggest challenges that people have when getting to the root causes is trying to articulate those clearly. What are some questions that you ask people to find out the root causes of their success?
The simplest way, and you may have heard, or I'm sure it's, kind of almost intuitive, is to ask the question, why? Why am I successful? And that certainly starts to dig in. So if I use an analogy of just a car that wouldn't start, and I say, well, my car won't start. Well, why doesn't it start? Well, there's no power. Okay, well, that's not a root cause. That's a direct cause that I don't have any power. And I say, well, why don't I have any power? Well, it's because the battery's dead.
Can I just stop you there real quick? Just please clearly articulate for us the difference between a root cause and a direct cause.
Yeah, the direct cause is going to be like a symptom. So it's going to be something that you experience, something that you see, something that is present when you're kind of experiencing the outcome or experiencing the situation.
Okay, excellent. Please go on. Yeah, I get that now.
Yeah, right on the surface.
Yes.
But then as you dig a little further past the surface and you say, okay, well, why is the battery dead? And you say, well, what happens is the alternator is not charging it. And why is the alternator not charging it? It's because the belt is loose. Why is the belt loose? It's because the tensioner has failed. The bearing in the tensioner has failed. Now, at that moment, we're actually getting to the root. We're getting to the source of what created the battery not working. And the tip I'll give your audience, which is going to really kind of give them some superpowers here, is to not stop there. There are three kinds of root causes.
Okay.
You either typically have a mistake a person makes. We'll call that a human mistake, a human error. You have a physical failure, which is the bearing in our tensioner in my kind of automobile example.
Yes.
But the third, the one that you want to get to, is what's called the systematic or latent root cause. And this is where this becomes something that you can actually use to scale for your business. Because when I ask myself, what is the physical root cause? It's that bearing. But if I ask why one more time, is why would the bearing go bad? I recognize I have no preventative maintenance on this vehicle. I don't have a pattern of caring for the equipment. And now this is where it goes from just fixing my dead battery to saying the lack of a preventative maintenance program on this vehicle. The dead battery was a gift. And it taught me that there was a failure, and I got to the bottom, the source of that specific failure. But it also showed me a systematic problem. And that systematic problem, that lack of PM, may have caused the crane on the back of the truck to fail and hurt somebody, may have caused a failure with my brakes, may have caused a failure in a system that is significantly more dangerous or important. And it also is suffering from my lack of PM or inspection. So it opens up that door to really, kind of appreciate either where you have your strength or where, that mistake or weakness may be, and to really think about what systems really matter.
I think that's interesting because if you're able to identify those latent root causes, you can begin to address the thing that many people say, which is this is just the way the business is. And I think one of the things that a lot of construction companies settle for is the construction is chaotic. It's just the way it is, instead of doing the work to get to those latent root causes. What do you think of that?
100%. And if we cycle it all the way back to the kind of the beginning of how does somebody scale and how do they kind of get to that spot, when that kind of high performer, when that key individual in the organization, that owner, that person that we're dependent on, starts getting to the root cause of their success, they start getting to the root cause of issues they're having. If they're focusing on running around fixing idlers on belts, which is what is the chaos I think you're describing,
yes,
we're never going to be better tomorrow than we were today.
Yeah.
But when they realize that if I focus on the system of how we do preventative maintenance and care, and I create a standardized practice that every operator does before, during, after checks,
yes,
and that we have, these systematic ways of working, I don't run around with my toolkit in the back of my truck trying to fix everything every day,
yes,
because things don't break as much. And that moment of recognizing that systems matter, and that as an owner, as a key individual, the mistake or the opportunity, that saying that, price is something you pay once, cost is something you pay forever. When that mistake or problem happens, if I don't get to the root cause, if I don't see the system that failed, then you're going to have an ongoing cost. But if I get to that systematic source, then you can have that root cause of success, and you can really double down and not have that experience, not have that problem any longer.
All right, quick break to talk about my book, Construction Genius. This is what I want you to do. Go to Amazon, search for the book, read all of the 5-star reviews, because there's a ton of them. Over 50 to be precise. And the reason I want you to read them is because real people wrote those reviews who've actually read the book. And it'll give you an idea of why you should go and buy a copy right now on Amazon. And here's the deal. If you purchase 10 or more copies for your company, and then send me an email, eric@constructiongenius.com, I'll come in via Zoom and do a 1-hour Q&A and a bonus training session with your team at no charge. I normally charge $4,500 for an hour of my time. And again, for you, I'll do it at no charge if you buy 10 or more copies of my book. And the reason you should buy it is all in the title. It's effective, hands-on, practical, simple, no BS, leadership, strategy, sales, and marketing advice for construction companies. So if you're in the construction industry, this book is for you. So you can get it on Amazon. You can also get it on Audible in the audio version as well, narrated by yours truly. And I know you'll really enjoy it. So go out and get the book. And now back to the interview.
It's interesting because I think one of the things that people struggle with when they're doing this kind of work is that if I did fix the root causes, then the way I feel in my business would change. And yet, because I'm so familiar with the feeling of not identifying root causes and not fixing them, that strangeness then keeps me from diligently looking for and fixing root causes, because it's so unfamiliar to me to feel, you could say, ordered or clear or systematic.
Yeah. And again, the similarities between, I think, the experiences your audiences have, the experience that I have working with Fortune 500 companies with the same things, they're identical. They're identical. We have those superheroes working in those companies doing that same thing where they don't want to let go because that's how I get paid.
Yes.
My value to this organization is my ability to stay here till 10 o'clock tonight
Yes.
and to fix everything that has to be fixed. The idea that I create a system where I can go home early makes me very uncomfortable. I'm not at all interested in that. And I think, again, a lot of people who've kind of worked their way up in a business or they've created a business from the ground up
Yes.
probably can remember moving from being the person who's turning wrenches to the person supervising a crew.
Yes.
And moving from the person supervising a crew to the person bidding and managing a job.
Yes.
And these are jumps, these are leaps in how you contribute and what you do.
Yes.
And what I'm talking about is a leap just like that.
Yes.
That if you're managing and bidding the job, and then you're going out there and leveling concrete, I'm going to guess you're not super successful.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. It's interesting.
Same thing has to happen here.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because I've reflected on this quite a bit. Is one of the reasons why people struggle when they get promoted is because their new role of leadership essentially feels foreign to them.
Yes.
Feelings of dissatisfaction or guilt because they don't feel like they're working, they don't feel like they're getting things done, then lead them to micromanage. So in your experience, what is the most effective way to coach someone through the new feeling that they get when they get promoted? How do you help them to get comfortable with that so that they're not constantly going back to the old way that they behaved because it's so familiar to them?
A huge part of my work, my practice is coaching. And I think having a good coach, having somebody who can help you see the things that you may not see yourself is extremely valuable. Because I don't think there's a single technique where on a given morning you wake up and say, you know what, I kind of feel differently today.
Yeah.
I think it is like anything else. It does take some work. It takes some support. It takes some coaching. And that coaching is really trying to help people see how others see them. And it kind of comes back to the point you made, because I couldn't agree with you more. I think people in the field, they get there because they have a sense of adrenaline
Yes.
from the success.
Yes.
They get a sense of adrenaline from the value that they create, the importance that they have. And recognizing, if you can see yourself now, that walking down to one of the tradesmen and trying to show them how to lay a brick is not giving the perception you think it is. You're thinking, I'm going to show them the way I do it. I'm going to show them the quality I expect on my job. And in reality, they're thinking, you don't have anything better to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because this morning, the bricks we were supposed to have weren't here on time. And you're down here telling me how to lay them. Why don't you make sure they get here on time? And those kind of conversations are what good coaches can help people start to see, that you can be respected by doing your role now. And that role is man, machine, material, method, right? Is everything in place and is it all running the way it should be? And that makes a huge difference. Letting go of the how, letting others focus on it, really, really tough. The ones who make it are the ones who scale their business. I don't know anybody who scaled that, kind of construction business into the hundreds of millions that are out there worrying about whether or not the finishing trim on the building has been done correctly.
Yes. Yes. Okay. So I have a couple of questions here. You just mentioned that man, machine, material, method. Can you please,
Yes.
Can you just hone in on that, please?
Yeah. So it actually comes back to the root cause analysis conversation we were having. One conversation can be asking those whys, like we talked about with the car. But another technique is to ask what's sometimes called the 4 M's, and that's the man, machine, material, method.
Yes.
Because if we think about a successful outcome or we think about a failure, a mistake we had, those categories are very, very different categories. And the contribution of what creates a positive or a negative outcome is likely to come from the people who did the job, from the method that they followed, from the materials they used, or the equipment that they had access to or they were utilizing. And in most cases, successes and failures are not going to be any one thing. It's going to be, some combination of the right people with the right equipment, with the right materials. And that is what worked. And it's a great way to kind of ask those really good questions.
That's good. Yeah. So man, machine, material method. So I could imagine a situation where I do have a very good process. I have the best materials. I have an excellent piece of equipment, but I have a poorly trained person. And so the
Yes.
poorly trained person then results in all of those three other things being for naught. Am I hearing that right?
Exactly. This technique is sometimes called a fishbone diagram because it's visualized as like a fish that's like dead with the bones, where the head of the fish is the thing you're investigating. And then each of these categories are kind of bones that would be kind of laying off the spine that allow us to kind of understand that. And what's interesting, again, kind of comes back to our conversation about these systems and systematic root causes, is that you have this problem. And if you evaluate what happened, it was the lack of experience with the crew. We had the right materials, we had the right way of working, we had all the other elements, but it's very easy for us to say that they weren't doing it my way. And now, what we're doing is we're potentially changing or addressing something that wasn't the problem. We've decided not to upgrade or utilize a piece of equipment. And now we've got great experience. They're using the right methods,
Yep.
but we're using something that's just beyond its useful life.
Yes. Excellent. Going back to this idea of coaching, what are some of your favorite coaching questions?
Yeah. My favorite coaching question is, if you didn't come to work today, if you weren't here right now, what would happen? It's a question that Sergeant Mabry, who was an E5, he was a gunner on my tank, asked me. He became Command Sergeant Major Mabry, had an enormously successful military career, but he asked me that, on one given afternoon.
You were in the military?
I was.
Yeah. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So I had a very kind of interesting career, not the career that many of the veterans of, kind of recent years have had, but I had a really interesting career where I was a chemical officer and I ended up, leading a tank platoon. And I knew nothing about tanks. And everything I learned was because of the crew, because of what they were willing and able to teach me. And my leadership technique as a very young man was to do everything and to be that superhero. And I think one of the reasons why I can talk so openly about it is it's takes one to know one, right?
Yeah, right.
I kind of knew who that person was because that was me.
Yeah.
And Sergeant Mabry helped me by asking me that question. What would happen if you're no longer here, sir?
That's
and
neat.
I said, hey, I think everything's going to fall apart because nobody knows what to do because I keep telling everybody what to do. And he said, exactly.
That's interesting. Okay. So that's the initial question. And from there, based on how the person responds, what do you do after that question?
Yeah, finding and pointing out where they have great systems, where things are working. I love this concept of what I call the golden hour. And the golden hour is the place where everything just works, everything just clicks. And it's not necessarily that it is always going to work, it's always going to click. It's that we had, just an amazing job. Everything went smoothly, everything went perfectly. It is as valuable doing those 5 whys or doing that fishbone diagram on that amazing job to say, well, what about it made it amazing, as it would be to look at a disaster where we lost our asses and we were completely upside down and then saying, well, what the hell happened?
Yes.
Most organizations spend a huge amount of time on what went wrong, not what went successful. You can systemize what went successful. You tend to go out and fix what went wrong.
Yes.
So if you keep fixing, you're going to fix always. But if you start learning what systems are working and start employing it, start sharing that best practice, start standardizing it. I've used this formula in factories and with my own kind of local business here. And it's transformational, makes a huge difference.
Think about the last time you promoted someone into a leadership role and it failed. Why did it fail? I can tell you one reason. People know how to build projects, but they don't know how to build and lead teams of people. Construction comes with its challenges that only insiders truly understand. Generic leadership training doesn't cut it. You need a program to train your leaders built specifically for construction professionals led by an industry expert. And my online course, The Shift, is exactly that course. It has 5 modules. It'll teach your people how to control their calendars and reduce stress and embrace chaos and accomplish their critical tasks. It will teach them the 3 essential messages they have to communicate every day in order to motivate and lead their team effectively. It'll show them how to build and lead a high-performing team, give them a framework for running effective meetings so they'll be able to solve problems in less than an hour, and also give them a higher perspective on their leadership that will enable them to work on the business and on their teams and not get stuck in the weeds micromanaging. So go out to my website, theshift.constructiongenius.com, read all about the course, and then enroll yourself and your leaders in the course, and I guarantee that it will transform your leadership. If it does not, you take the whole course and you didn't get benefit from it, you just send me an email, eric@constructiongenius.com, and I will cheerfully refund you 100% of your money. I'm really confident this course will transform your leadership. So again, go out to the website, theshift.constructiongenius.com, learn more about the course, and start taking it today.
Yeah, it's very interesting because we tend to whistle past our successes all the time.
We do.
And focus on our failures. I know you have this idea of how negativity bias impacts our focus. Is that related to this idea of looking at the golden hour as opposed to the failures?
It is. It is. And, you know, when I talk about this golden hour and saying, let's focus on our successes, I almost always get the same reaction, that people shake their head and say, okay, that's interesting. It's clever. It's useful. And then they walk away and they go back to that, you know, kind of human nature of this negativity bias of saying, hey, what did you do wrong? And what did you do wrong? And, you know, where's this mistake? And where's this problem? And the idea that you have to really consciously focus on, where am I extending the periods of success? Where am I extending the level of performance? And this negativity bias kind of works against us all the time. And I think it's especially important for crews, for trades,
Yes.
the folks that I have, that they're going to find out how many hours they were over on the job.
Yes.
They're going to find out, you know, how much material we can't account for, and they're going to hear about it for sure. And the problem is, by the time we figure out and add up how many hours they were over or what material we can't account for, they're 2 weeks down the road. That's not an immediate feedback. And all that is telling them they lost the game, that this was the score. This was the lagging indicator of your performance on this job 5 days ago, 7 days ago, whatever. Teams that are going to succeed are teams that have leading indicators. And when you can help them understand, what would that definition of a golden hour look like? That means I understand the outcome I need.
Yeah.
So I completely understand the hours available to this job, that I'm not just being given the job. I know what the budget is for it. I know what the material lists are for it. And I know that success is accounting for all my material, meeting all the quality expectations, and doing it within the time that was allotted. And now being able to kind of get into that zone of, where am I relative to that, you know, kind of place, and doing it how I see it best. But the key thing now is, managers who manage by correcting are typically never going to get excellence. They're going to get expectations. But if you have that outcome where that crew knows the outcome you're expecting, and when you arrive to sort of check on them, what they're telling you is, we're going to need this, or we're going to need that, or this machine went down, or our batteries went dead. And can you run to the shop? Can you do this? Can you do that? It's exactly the way a sports team works, right? Everybody on the sidelines is making sure that if you break the shoelace on your sneaker, we got a shoelace, we got a sneaker we're going to give you. We're not saying, hey, that sucks for you, man. You should have thought about it. Now you're going to be late. That's not the way a winning team operates. The player knows the outcome they got to create.
Mm-hmm.
The player is responsible for delivering on that outcome.
Mm-hmm.
And then the management, the coaches, the supervisors are there to support and enable. And in my experience, that culture of supporting and enabling your crew versus managing and supervising it, that's the polar difference, right?
So
big difference.
Yeah. So when we're looking at this golden hour then and extending the periods of success, is that where we would bring in those 4 M's, the man, machine, method, material and method, exactly, and question what was going on with these things when we were in that golden hour?
Exactly. Exactly. Trying to recognize that there were things that we did. That job, we had a little extra time, so we did a layout of all our material.
Yeah.
Versus having it stacked in 5 different trucks.
Yeah.
So we did a layout. And then as we were doing the job, we knew where everything was.
Yep.
And we also knew what was missing. And we also knew the extras that we had.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that went well. Now, the thing is, you could easily look past that and say, well, that's just because the other contractors were running a little bit late and we had 2 hours. So we decided to do a layout. The question is, that layout saved me 4 hours. So why am I not doing a layout on every job?
That's beautiful. It's so interesting, though, how often we do walk past our successes and then, wonder why we struggle instead of understanding why we succeed and repeating that.
It is. There's a cultural element. And this, again, is where I think coaching can be so valuable for owners, for leaders, is that a lot of people I've met actually want the struggle.
Yes, it's true.
They just want the struggle, and not to make light of it at all, but I think it is not that different than a disease like alcoholism, that it is that strong in terms of its feeling, its desire, and you're not going to fix it by yourself.
Yeah.
You got to sort of recognize that it's something that needs to change, and then you're going to need help changing it.
Yeah. It's weird, though, because then let's say you're working with someone and, you're systematizing their business, helping them to do that, and they're beginning to perform in a better way, but they naturally default to that struggle. It's almost as if you have to help them to find something perhaps even outside their business that they can struggle with in a healthy way.
Yeah. Well, I think, a lot of them can, and they do, I'm sure it's the case for you as well. These are the folks that make great high school football coaches, right? They make, they've got that little league team, they're driving them, but they're going to the state championship, right?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's interesting. You have I know one of the favorite movies of folks our age is the Matrix. You have an interesting insight into the lessons the Matrix movie teaches us about fighting fires at work. And can you share that with us?
Yeah. I love my analogies. And this is one that as I've gotten older, I've found that it's like less useful. So I appreciate you seeing the value of it. There's a famous scene where, Neo is going to see the Oracle and meets the child who is trying to bend the spoon, is kind of bending that spoon. And then Neo tries it. And the child kind of gives the advice, kind of paraphrasing it, that you can't bend the spoon. You've got to bend the world around the spoon.
Yeah.
And of course, that was some foreshadowing to Neo's ability to kind of manipulate the Matrix.
Right.
And to me, it's just such an extraordinary kind of point that the firefighters of our world go out and they just work on bending the spoon. They just go to that moment, they go to that instance, they go to that situation. And there's a limit to what that's ever going to do for the organization because we're depending on that individual's heroic effort. But as soon as you start to kind of bend the world around the spoon, and I start thinking about what are our systems? What are our best practices? What are our ways of working? Does everyone on my crew know the what, the why, and are committed to the best practices for the how?
Yes.
What I'm doing is I'm kind of setting the conditions, setting the circumstances around that spoon. And it's not about that individual task and activity now. It's about the system. It's the world around it. And as an owner, as a leader, as somebody who's running my business I've created, you're in the best position to create the conditions, to create the systems. Yeah. Those individual crews that showed up to clock in, they're not in any position to create a system or create conditions.
That's interesting how just the thought there that every business can be in a certain way its own universe.
Yeah, that's a great observation. And as you say that, I sometimes call it industrial tourism, all of the sites and factories and places I've had to visit. And I find it very humorous because they are completely different universes, even culturally, just the way they interact and behave with each other is entirely different. It is such a good observation.
That's interesting. So we've talked about the what, the why, the how. We dived into understanding the root causes versus the symptomatic causes of issues. We talked about the man, machine, material, method, framework. You have this book, Super Performance. Tell us a little bit about it and what other insights are in the book that would be valuable to the audience.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. The book Super Performance, it's your 8 strategies to really reach your team's full potential, reach your individual potential, and help your organization reach its full potential. And what we're trying to lay out in these 8 strategies are much like, I think, everything we talked about in today's episode, trying to be really practical, not trying to be overly complicated, not looking at trying to kind of, hire trainers or consultants or do things only big businesses do. But to take really simple, practical ways of thinking about things, the golden hour, the root cause of success. Another example I'll just quickly share with your audience that I think they'll find really useful is when it comes to creating change for your organization, for being able to drive improvement. I always kind of coach leaders, coach owners that it's like trying to fill a cup. And when you spend all of your time trying to put the value in the cup, you're trying to add to it, you're trying to add revenue, you're trying to add jobs, you're trying to add all of these things. Almost every owner is focused on the addition. But if we think about that analogy of just that simple cup, the reality is the level of the cup is how much you put in, but it's also how much is leaking out. And the systems and our way of actually working and preventing mistakes and costs and errors, as well as leveraging best practices, is what stops leaks. And I know I can think, of a number of contractors, a number of businesses I've worked with that they are amazing at addition.
Right.
Terrible at preventing leaks.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, it's true because they're good at, so another way of looking at it then is they're good at getting the work, but they're not necessarily good at systematizing how they build it so that they stop leaking the money that's coming into the business.
Yeah, and I think it'll probably ring true for a lot of folks in your audience. They probably have lived it or they've experienced it where they look at it and say, hey, we've grown our business. We've added crews, we've added capability, and I made less money this year than I did before I grew the business.
Absolutely.
And that problem of adding more, but having less at the end of the year in your distribution, that is exactly what I'm talking about. And it's a fixable problem. Because you have to focus on the systems, the way of executing on the work you're adding, and then you get to keep more.
Yeah, that's right on. Excellent. So tell us how we can get in touch with you, George, how people can get the book, all that kind of good stuff, please.
No, thank you so much. It's georgepazansky.com is my primary website. myblendedlearning.com is my company website. And of course, the book is for sale everywhere at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, booksellers everywhere. You can buy it on the website as well as see all of our content, all our materials as well.
Excellent. So we'll have those links in the show notes so that everyone can go and check out George's stuff. Please go to Amazon. I'm just over here and you can go grab the book. It's available on Kindle and audio and hardcover. Did you do the audio yourself?
I did.
I'm glad you did because you've got a great voice for audio.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
Excellent. So we'll have those links in the show notes. George, thank you for joining us. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you so much.
Great conversation with George today. Please share it with other people who are struggling with processes in their business. And of course, please go out to George's website, links in the show notes. Go out to Amazon and buy the book. And thank you for listening to Construction Genius. Give us a rating and a review wherever you get your podcasts. We will get you on the next episode. Thank you for listening to this episode of Construction Genius. Hope you found that 1% of inspiration to help you in the next few days. If you like the show, please give us a 5-star review on iTunes, share it with other construction leaders who you think would benefit, and always remember that the show is brought to you by Kick-Ass Meetings. I've been working with construction leaders since 2004, teaching them how to run extremely effective problem-solving meetings that gets their people collaborating, taps into their creativity, and to get yourself a free copy of the Kick-Ass Meeting Report, go to www.ericanderton.com/kickassmeetings. Grab yourself that free report, read it, use it in your business. You'll find it extremely useful. And thanks again for listening.